Hello and you're very welcome back to a new episode of Nobby on Cars, featuring today the Citroen C5 Aircross, which Citroen wants you to consider up against something like a Nissan Qashqai or a Hyundai Tucson, which is one of the best-selling cars in Ireland. So can this new revised facelift version of the C5 Aircross grab your attention and hold on to it? That's today's question. We're going to have a look around the car in massive details today. We'll give you prices, specs, information and everything you need to know whether you should shortlist this car in amongst the other vehicles we have just mentioned. If you haven't subscribed just yet to the channel, maybe consider doing so, and welcome to Nobby on Cars. There's quite a different nose in the car now, this new revised version of it. It's kind of got a more aggressive stance with little dots of what look like, I suppose, silver, but they're bits of plastic, but it does certainly change the front of the car as well. There's kind of a copper insert going on in this particular model. This is a C edition version of the vehicle, which is kind of the one you want. It's the top of the range, and you can get it for early 40s if you're prepared to go for a manual. In fact, the manual, diesel and petrol are exactly the same price. If you've got a few more quid in your pocket, you can go up to nearer to 50 grand for a plug-in hybrid with 180 brake horsepower. Feel and flair to familiar packs on Citroen, but this obviously is the C series. Platinum grey is this colour, and on this version you get blind spot, wireless charging, wireless CarPlay, panoramic glass sunroof, and actually the walk from an entry-level feel to an entry-level, well, it's not really an entry-level, but the standard car with a manual gearbox in a C edition is actually not as much as you think. It's a jump of maybe 4 grand, but a glass panoramic sunroof in cars these days is generally about €2,000. So there's quite a lot of spec in this car if you're willing to jump to that extra trim. Here are some glass panels. On the outside they don't look like it, but they do allow a little bit more light into the car, and if you've got a plug-in hybrid version of it, you'll have another charging port on the other side of the vehicle. These are upgraded 19-inch alloy wheels, and even though they're 19, Citroen do live up to their name of making cars that are just a bit more comfortable, and that is still the case with the C5 Aircross. This new version of the C5 Aircross also has a kind of trio of little marks in the headlight, and they almost bulge out towards the side of the car. C5 Aircross badge here. Again, on this version you'll get an electric tailgate. 580 litres standard boot size, and then over 700 if you push the seats forward. What do I mean by that? I'll explain in a second, but it's quite a bit bigger than the plug-in hybrid and is pretty much on a par with something like the Skoda Kodiaq. The parcel shelf kind of splits in two if you need some of it still in the car, and it will actually fit down that gap between the rear seats and the boot if you're not using that extra bit of space. I also like that Citroen have included an actual spare wheel, so if you get stuck at the side of the road or on a motorway at midnight in the dark, you're not waiting on someone to come out and help, because you can actually change the wheel yourself. So fair play to them for that. This doesn't particularly open very high, so if you're taller in stature, more than me anyway, and I'm not even quite 6 foot, you're going to hit your head off that, or you're going to be dunking down like that. Get the idea. Something that is a little bit of a letdown though in the C5 Aircross is something like the Qashqai has really wide opening rear doors, and on the C5 Aircross there's quite a bit left to be desired if you are trying to get a nice wide entry point into that car with child seats and stuff. Look, it's still going to fit, but just the car has now been able to look at the other models on the market, and one of the first things I'd be doing is saying, can we make these doors open a little bit wider? Back of the C5 Aircross has a fully flat floor, and the platform this car sits on is used for so many vehicles, so they've been able to benefit from that. Also, this bench has got 3 individual seats, kind of like the Peugeot 5008. However, there isn't Isofix in this middle seat, unfortunately, so in my opinion they've kind of missed a trick there. It isn't a 7-seater either, but that's okay. But the fact that it is an individual seat, why haven't they been able to put an Isofix? Some people do need 3. Leg room, still pretty decent. That seat is really, really far back. The windows go almost all the way down, and this part of the door cover doesn't come up especially high, so younger children can still see out. Another party piece for the C5 Aircross is each individual seat can be manually slid backwards or forwards, and that's what I was getting at with the boot. So if you have people with shorter legs, you can move this forward and have even more space in the back. And Citroen have even given you a kind of a little flappy bit here to cover that extra gap, because one thing about benches, if you can slide them forward, people can see into your boot if you have valuables inside. There's a charging port in the back for a USB charger, and the glass roof allows tons of light to come in, but you will need to go to this more expensive version of the car to get that. Something else that is pretty handy, you can, because they're individual seats, put them individually down, because maybe you still need 2 kids in the car with you today, but you need extra space from the DIY store. So they really have thought of a lot of practical things that you watching this as a parent will probably need if you got a car like this. There is also a button for the driver who can electronically adjust the child locks on this car, keeping your little ones in the back nice and safe. So this new model version of the C5 Aircross also has Citroen's upgraded infotainment system, which is pretty easy to use. It's got a nice wide 10-inch screen on it. Instruments are fully digital in this part of the car. There's paddles for changing gears if you go for the automatic 8-speed gearbox. Quite a jump in price. You're talking six grand thereabouts. And then further on, if you want to go into the plug-in hybrid version of it, which comes in a petrol. This one is a diesel, and it's actually kind of refreshing to be in something that's a diesel for a change and just see how much fuel economy it does compared to so many other cars. 6.3 litres per 100 kilometres without even trying. Cup holders are an okay space, but if you're using 2 at the same time, the lids kind of cross over, a bit messy. Good storage down here, however, you can fit lots and lots of things. What they would be, that's entirely up to you. Glove box is still half obliterated because of the fuse box in this car. That's something they are changing in some models, but this isn't a brand new model, so that hasn't been reflected yet. And if you got AirPods and keys and things, you can chuck them down into an extra little cubby space here. These seats are very, very comfortable. They've got extra thickness. There's extra foam in most Citroen seats, and you can always spot the difference because they're just very, very cushiony. And if comfort is your thing, if you're not overly obsessed with a car that's really sharp around corners, although it isn't bad, and is just a little bit more floaty on the drive, but you prefer that kind of softness in a car, Citroen are the brand for you. Good few shortcut buttons thankfully are still left. They'll bring you to your nav, your climate, your tunes, even setting up the different apps in the car. All here at the touch of a button. So if you're allergic to touch screens, again, it's the car for you. The steering wheel, pretty much the same as the last version of the C5 Aircross. But if you go, again, for this top tier spec, you'll get leather seats. Otherwise, it's black cloth, or the mid-spec, which is cloth and Alcantara. Even the clatter of a diesel engine is something I've kind of forgotten about, because so many cars that I'm testing these days are either petrol, plug-in hybrid or electric. There are still a few rare diesels on the fleet, and I think it's kind of refreshing to see. We should have as much choice as possible as consumers for as long as possible. And this week I have to do a long enough journey at motorway speeds in an EV, and I've already been working out in my head where I'm going to go, where I'm going to stop, what the day I'll have to charge if I want to get up early the next morning and be guaranteed of making it to my destination by driving at a constant motorway speed. So, you know, chuck a tank of diesel at me and I'm not exactly complaining. So the car we're in today is a 1.5 blue HDI diesel engine, 8-speed automatic gearbox, fuel economy, without trying, 6 litres per 100 kilometres. You could better that, and if you're on motorways, you'll most certainly better that. Very sunny day here in early spring, if you call February spring, wherever you are. It is a noisy enough clatter, you know, even at 50 kilometres an hour, you will still kind of hear it, so that probably could be better. It's a good high up seating position. Seats really are comfortable, you know, like you'll go over bumps, and there are a few on occasion where yes, you'll feel the odd thud on these upgraded alloy wheels, but by and large very smooth, very comfortable, kind of rattle free interior. Impressive. Got blind spot in these mirrors. Digital instruments mean they're always easy to see, and those physical buttons come into their own when you're driving, because how often do you feel a little bit distracted if you're driving a car with a touchscreen and touchscreen only for essential controls like climate, and even for a fleeting second your eyes are off the road. It's a fact, and the fact that there's both physical and screen in the C5 Aircross, pretty welcome. Gear changes, they're a little bit slow, you know, they could be a bit quicker, but you know, in this kind of car I suppose you don't really need it, but yeah, just by today's modern automatic gearboxes, it's a little bit sleepy in the gear changes, and sometimes it'll over labour maybe second gear in slow traffic where it's like, do you want me to change or do you want me to stay where I am? You can of course override that with the paddles that come here on the car also. Some of the safety features on board the car: you have your blind spot, as I mentioned. It will alert you if it thinks you're going to hit the car in front and apply the brakes. If you don't, it's got traffic speed sign recognition, and in fact there's a camera, an image of a camera always down there, like as if it's just warning you, because I don't think you can pick up speed cameras or anything like that, but just warning you that, you know, you're obeying the speed limit or not obeying the speed limit, whichever way you might be driving. It's all just very, very pleasant. You know, there's really nothing wrong with this car. I'm trying to pick out little things like, yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, the eyes are fixed in the middle. How come they haven't bothered doing that? Yeah, the tailgate and the boot could be a little bit taller, but like, it is a very, very solid crossover. If you're considering one for your family, I think you could look in an awful lot worse places. Well, I've got to say, the C5 Aircross really does deserve to be on your shortlist. Obviously, this one is the top spec model, and sometimes you can be a little bit blindsided by all the goodies on board. But even still, at the entry-level one, at about €39,000, it's a little bit on the high side compared to maybe something like a Qashqai. But a lot of the cars, the Tucson PHEV, well into the 40,000s, Ireland's best-selling car in that segment. Lot to think about. You know, if you're looking at something like an ID4, this still is a much cheaper car. I think they've really thought of families and how they've designed it, whether it's the practicality of things in the second row for passengers and kids. Everything's wipeable, good boot, plenty of space. So if you are considering your next family car, the C5 Aircross really should be on your shortlist. If you've any comments or questions, please do leave them down below. Remember, you can help us out by hitting up buymeacoffee.com/Nobby on Cars if you want to give us a €5 tip to support this fully independent channel. And I'll see you on the next one.